I have wiped down the same counter at Delry's for 19 years, and I can tell you the exact sound a milkshake makes when it hits the back of a person's neck. It's a wet, stupid sound, a slap and a splash at the same time. I heard it that afternoon and I knew before I even turned around that something had gone wrong in my diner. But let me back up. You don't understand the milkshake until you understand the woman it landed on. And you don't understand her until I tell you about the kind of nothing day it was, the kind of day where you'd never guess anything was coming. It was a Tuesday in late June, hot the way only a small town in the valley gets hot, where the air sits down on the road and refuses to move. We're a truck stop town really half a mile off the highway, the kind of place people pass through on the way to somewhere they actually want to be. The diner sits on the corner of Main and a road that doesn't even have a proper name, just a number. Red booths, a counter with 8 stools, a bell over the door that I keep meaning to oil. That afternoon, the lunch rush had thinned out. We had old Mr. Prout in his usual spot by the window, reading the paper he'd already read twice. We had a young mother trying to get her toddler to eat something other than ketchup. And we had the boys. I call them boys, but they were grown men, 3 of them, maybe 22, 23. They came in most weeks. Loud, the kind of loud that wants you to hear it. They worked construction on the new development going up east of town, and on payday they'd come in flush with money, and that mean energy young men get when they've got cash and an audience and nothing to be afraid of. The loudest one was Cody. Big shoulders, backwards cap, a laugh that filled the whole room whether you wanted it to or not. His buddy Trent was the one who filmed everything on his phone, always recording, always looking for something to post. And the third one, a quieter one named Marcus, mostly just went along with whatever the other 2 cooked up. He laughed a beat too late, like he was checking first if he was allowed to. I bring them up because they were already in a mood that day. They'd been ribbing each other, talking too loud about a fight one of them had supposedly won, and I remember thinking, please, not today, I'm too tired for this today. Then the bell over the door rang and she walked in. I want to be careful here because I've told this story a few times now and people always assume she walked in looking like trouble. She didn't, that's the whole thing. She walked in looking like nobody at all. She was maybe 30, 32, average height, wore a faded gray t-shirt, jeans, and running shoes that had seen some miles. Brown hair pulled back in a short, practical ponytail, a ball cap in her hand that she set on the table. She had a small canvas bag over one shoulder, the kind you'd carry a book in. The only thing I noticed, and I only noticed it because noticing things is half my job, was the way she moved. Quiet, economical, she didn't waste any motion. When she sat down at the booth 2 over from the boys, she didn't drop into it the way most folks do. She sort of lowered herself and her eyes did a slow pass of the room before she even reached for the menu. Door, window, kitchen, me, the boys, back to the door. I didn't think anything of it then. You replay it later and it means something. In the moment, it was just a tired woman wanting a quiet meal. She ordered a black coffee and a grilled cheese, said please and thank you, called me ma'am, which made me feel about 100 years old, but I appreciated it. There was something steady in her voice. Low, she didn't fill the silence with chatter. She just waited, hands folded, looking out the window at the heat shimmering off the parking lot. The boys clocked her about 2 minutes after she sat down. I saw it happen. Cody leaned back, said something under his breath, and Trent snorted. The toddler's mother glanced over and decided wisely to ask for the check. Mr. Prout turned a page of his paper a little louder than necessary, which was his way of telling the whole room to behave. It never worked. Hey, Cody called over, hey, you new in town? She didn't turn right away. She finished looking at whatever she was looking at out the window. Then she said, without any heat, just passing through. Passing through, Cody repeated like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. To where? There's nothing out here, he grinned at his friends, unless you came to see me. Trent's phone was already up. I could see the little red dot he was filming. She looked at Cody then, really looked at him the way you'd look at a weather report, not afraid, not impressed, just taking in information. Just passing through, she said again and turned back to the window. Now here's a thing I've learned in 19 years of pouring coffee for human beings. There's a kind of man who can't stand being looked at like that, being looked at and then dismissed. It gets under his skin worse than an insult would, because at least an insult means you mattered enough to insult. She'd looked at Cody and decided he wasn't a problem, and he knew it, and it ate at him. I brought her the coffee. Up close she had a small scar through one eyebrow, old and faded, and her hands, when she wrapped them around the mug, were not soft. They were working hands, calloused along the edges. A short nail on the trigger finger, I'd think about that later. She thanked me and I went back behind the counter, and I had this little knot in my stomach, the one you get when you've worked in a place long enough to feel weather coming before the sky changes. The boy started in for real then. It was small at first, Cody narrating loudly to his friends, making up a story about who she was. Bet she's running from somebody. Bet she's got a boyfriend who's gonna come looking. Trent laughing, keeping the camera on her, Marcus doing his late laugh. She ate her grilled cheese, drank her coffee, said nothing. And the more she said nothing, the louder they got because the silence was a challenge to them now. They needed her to react. They needed it the way some men need a drink. Maybe she can't hear us, Trent said, grinning. Maybe she's deaf. You deaf, sweetheart, Cody called. She set down her sandwich, wiped her fingers on a napkin, neat and slow, and she said in that same flat, steady voice, I can hear you fine, I'm choosing not to care, there's a difference. And then she went back to eating. You could hear Mr. Pruitt's paper stop rustling. The whole diner went still for a second. It was such a clean line. It landed so soft and so hard at the same time, I almost laughed. I had to bite the inside of my cheek. That was the moment it should have ended. If they'd had any sense, that's where they'd have laughed it off, paid up and left. But Cody's face went tight and I watched something turn over in him, something ugly, and I knew it wasn't going to end. He'd been embarrassed in front of his friends and the camera, and he was the type that had to win the last exchange or die trying. He stood up. He had a milkshake in his hand. We make a good milkshake at Delroy's, thick, the kind you have to work at with a straw. He'd ordered it 10 minutes earlier and barely touched it. Strawberry, pink and stupid in his big hand. Hey, he said, walking over to her booth, you got something on your shirt. And before I could open my mouth, before I could even say his name, he tipped the whole thing down the back of her collar. That was the sound, that wet, stupid slap and splash. Pink milkshake running down her neck into her shirt, soaking the gray cotton dark. Trent howled. He had the whole thing on camera. Oh my God, he was saying. Oh my God, bro, you didn't. Marcus laughed his late laugh, louder this time, caught up in it now. Cody stood over her with his arms spread wide, performing for the room, for the phone, for himself. There you go, sweetheart, now you stand out. And the woman didn't move. That's the part I'll never forget. She didn't flinch when the cold hit her. She didn't gasp. She didn't whip around. She sat there for one long second with milkshake running down inside her shirt, and her face didn't change at all. Then very slowly she reached for a napkin and dabbed at the back of her neck. Once, twice. She turned her head just enough to look at Cody over her shoulder. And what I saw in her eyes was not anger. I keep trying to describe it to people, and the closest I can get is this. It was the look of someone doing math. Calm, cold arithmetic. She was looking at him the way you'd look at a door you might have to go through, measuring it, deciding how much it would cost. You're going to want to sit back down, she said quietly. And Cody, God help him, laughed in her face. Here is where I have to slow the story down, because what happened next happened fast, and if I tell it fast you'll miss what mattered. Cody was still laughing when the bell over the door rang again. 2 men came in, and the second they crossed the threshold, the temperature of the room changed. I felt it before I understood it. You know how a dog goes quiet and stiff before you hear the thunder? That was me, behind my counter, going still without knowing why. They were both in their late 20s maybe. One tall and twitchy, eyes going everywhere at once, hood up despite the heat. The other shorter, heavier, with a denim jacket buttoned all the way to the throat on a 90-degree day. Nobody buttons a jacket like that in June unless they're hiding something against their body, and the part of my brain that had spent 19 years watching people knew it before the rest of me caught up. The short one's hand was already moving inside the jacket. Everybody stay where you are, he said, and his voice cracked on the last word and the gun came out. It was a real gun. I want to be clear because afterward people kept asking, was it real? Are you sure? And yes, I'm sure. I have looked at that gun more times in my memory than I have ever wanted to. Black, heavy, shaking a little in his grip because his hands weren't steady. The tall one pulled one too, smaller, and started waving it around the room at Mr. Pruitt, at me at the booths. Register, the short one barked at me. Now, and phones. Everybody puts their phone on the table, face up, hands where I can see them. The whole diner had gone to ice. The toddler's mother had her child crushed against her chest, her hand over the little one's mouth. Mr. Pruitt had both hands flat on his table, the paper forgot. Trent's phone clattered onto his table, he wasn't laughing anymore. Marcus had gone gray. And Cody, big loud Cody, was frozen mid-step beside the woman's booth, the empty milkshake cup still in his hand, his face suddenly very young and very scared. Funny thing, fear, it comes for the loud ones first. I started moving toward the register because the gun was pointed at me and I have a daughter and grandkids and I wanted to see them again. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hit the keys. And through all of it, the woman in the booth had not moved. The short one with the gun noticed her then. The only person in the room who wasn't terrified, just sitting there with Milkshake soaking her shirt, hands resting easy on the table. It rattled him. People who are doing a bad thing they're scared to do, they need everyone else to be scared too. It confirms the world for them. Her stillness was wrong and it scared him, and a scared man with a gun is the most dangerous animal there is. You, he said, swinging the barrel toward her. What's wrong with you? Stand up, get over there with. You're holding it wrong, she said. I swear that's what she said, quiet, almost gentle. You're holding it wrong, your grip's too high. The slide's going to bite the web of your hand when it cycles, and it's going to hurt, and you're going to flinch, and you're going to miss whatever you're aiming at. A pause. I'm telling you that because I don't think you actually want to shoot anybody today. I think you want money and I think you want to leave, am I right? The gunman stared at her, everybody stared at her. The tall one in the hood had stopped waving his gun around because even he couldn't process what he was seeing. Shut up, the short one said, but his voice had lost something. Shut up, Lady Isle. You've got the safety thumbed off but your finger's outside the guard, she went on in the same low even tone like she was talking a kid down off a roof. That's good actually, that tells me you're not as far gone as your friend. Your friend's got his finger on the trigger and his hand is shaking, and that's the thing that's going to get somebody killed in here, and it won't even be on purpose. So here's what I need from you. I need you to tell your friend to take his finger off the trigger. Just that. We start there. And the wild thing is, the short one half turned toward the tall one to do it. That's how good she was. She'd taken control of the room with nothing but her voice just by being the calmest object in it. The two robbers were now somehow listening to her. But the tall one in the hood panicked. He didn't like that the short one was listening to her. He didn't like that the plan, whatever scared half thought of a plan they'd had, was coming apart. He swung his gun toward her booth and screamed, I'll do it right now. I have replayed the next 2 seconds maybe 10,000 times. She moved. I have never seen a person move like that. There was no wind up to it, no warning, none of that telegraphing you see in movies. One instant she was sitting with her hands on the table, and the next she was simply not where the gun was pointed, dropped and rolled out of the booth low and fast, and her hand closed around the heavy glass sugar dispenser off the table edge as she came up. The tall one's gun went off. The sound in that small room was enormous, a flat, hard crack that I felt in my teeth. The bullet went into the wall behind where she'd been sitting, through the photo of Delry's grandfather that's hung there since before I started. She threw the sugar dispenser, not at his face, at his gun hand. Caught him square across the wrist and knuckles, and the gun spun out of his grip and skidded under a booth. And before it had stopped sliding, she was already across the floor, low inside the short one's reach. And she did something to his arm that I couldn't even follow, a turn and a twist, and the second gun was suddenly in her hand, and his arm was bent up behind him, and he was on his knees on my checkered floor making a high, thin sound. It took maybe 4 seconds, maybe less, from the gunshot to the short one on his knees, 4 seconds. She had the gun now? She dropped the magazine out of it in one motion and racked the slide, and the live round flipped out onto the floor and rolled. And she had the empty weapon turned in her grip, and she was already up and pivoting toward where the tall one was scrambling for the gun that had gone under the booth. Don't, she said. Just that one word, and there was something in how she said it, something I can't put into language, a flatness, an absolute certainty that froze him with his fingers an inch from the gun. He looked up at her. She was standing in the middle of my diner, Milkshake drying pink on her shirt, holding his partner's pistol, and she wasn't even breathing hard. Her eyes had gone somewhere else, somewhere cold and far away and very, very experienced. Hands behind your head, she said. Lace your fingers, get face down, you move toward that gun again and I will make a decision you won't like, and I really, truly don't want to, so please don't make me. He did what she said, they both did. The sheriff's people took 11 minutes to get there. I know because I was watching the clock over the pie case, the way you fix on something small when everything large has come apart. 11 minutes. She held that room the entire time. And here's the thing nobody believes until I explain it. She never pointed that gun at the two men once they were down. Not once. She dropped the magazine, cleared the chamber, and she held the empty pistol low and to the side the whole time between her and them, but never aimed. Because she told me later you never point a weapon at something you haven't decided to destroy, and she had decided not to. She just stood there calm as still water, talking to them in that low voice the whole time. Telling them to breathe. Telling them it was going to be okay, that they were going to live through this, that the smartest thing they'd done all day was stop. Talking two men who'd come in to rob me down off the worst decision of their lives like she was tucking them in. The tall one started crying at some point. face down on my floor, this kid who'd fired a gun in a diner full of strangers just crying, and she said, not unkind, yeah, I know, stay down. When the deputies came through the door, she set the empty gun on the counter, slow, with 2 fingers, and stepped back with her hands open and visible, and she said clearly, both weapons are clear. Magazines are on the floor. 2 suspects, both compliant. I'm not armed. Clean, efficient. Like she'd done it 100 times, like there was a script for this in her head that the rest of us never got handed. It was a young deputy, Holly's, who finally asked her the question we were all thinking. After the 2 men were cuffed and walked out, after the toddler's mother was sitting down with a glass of water shaking like a leaf, after Mr. Prude had said well about 4 times because it was the only word he could find. Deputy Hollies looked at her, at the way she'd moved, at the way she'd handled all of it, and he said, "Ma'am, I have to ask, are you law enforcement, military?" And she was quiet for a second. She picked up a clean napkin and wiped at the dried milkshake on her neck, almost embarrassed about it now. And she said, "I did 12 years in the Navy." "Doing what?" Hollies asked. She gave this small, tired smile. "I was on a team," she said. "I was the one who took the long shots." She let that sit a second. "Sniper, SEAL support element, then operational. 2 tour I can talk about and some I can't." She shrugged like she was apologizing. "I got out last year. I've been driving around the country trying to figure out who I am when nobody's shooting. I just wanted a grilled cheese." You could have heard a pin drop. I looked over at the boys' booth then, at Cody. I want you to picture it. This kid, this big loud kid who dumped a milkshake down a stranger's collar to make his friends laugh and to be a man in front of a camera. He was sitting in the booth where she'd thrown him a look an hour earlier. And the entire time the guns were out, the entire time she was doing what she did, he had been frozen in that seat, useless, terrified, while a woman half his size moved into the danger he'd been too scared to even look at. He'd mocked her, he'd called her sweetheart. He'd dumped a milkshake on her because he'd decided she was nobody, decided she was weak, decided she was a thing he could put his hands on to feel big. And she'd just saved his life. He knew it too, you could see it land on him in real time, the whole weight of it. His face did this thing, crumpled like wet paper. Trent had long since put his phone away. The footage he'd taken to humiliate her, the footage of the milkshake, he never posted it. I know that for a fact. Some things even a kid like Trent understands you don't get to keep. Cody stood up, and I thought for one terrible second that he was going to say something stupid because that's all I'd ever seen him do. But he didn't. He walked over to her, this kid who'd been so loud and he was shaking and he couldn't get his voice to work right. He started, "Ma'am, I'm." And he just couldn't, the word wouldn't come out whole. Sorry is a small word, but sometimes it's too big for the mouth that has to say it. She looked at him, same flat, steady gaze she'd given him over her shoulder an hour ago when he'd laughed in her face. But there was something different in it now, something that had decided to be merciful. She'd seen worse than Cody. She'd seen the actual worst of what people do, and maybe that's why she could be gentle. "What's your name?" she said, not even a question, just quiet. "Cody," he managed. "Cody," she nodded slowly. "You were scared in here just now, that's okay, everybody was." "Fear's not the problem." She paused, and her voice dropped lower just for him. "The problem is what you do to people when you decide they're smaller than you. You did that to me today before any guns came out. You looked at a stranger and decided she was a thing you could pour your drink on." She let that sit. "Don't do that again, not to anybody. You don't ever know who you're standing next to, and it shouldn't matter. You should be decent to the nobody in the corner, that's the whole point. Be decent when there's nothing in it for you, and no one's watching." Cody nodded. He couldn't speak. There were tears in his eyes and he wasn't ashamed of them anymore, which is its own kind of growing up. She picked up her ball cap off the table, put a 20 down for a grilled cheese and a coffee that cost $9 and waved off the change when I tried to give it back. And she went to the door and the bell rang, that bell I keep meaning to oil, and she paused in the doorway with the hot white light of the parking lot behind her. "Ma'am," I said because I couldn't let her just leave. "I don't even know your name." She looked back at me, and she smiled, a real one this time, tired and human and kind. "Doesn't matter," she said, "I was just passing through." And then she was gone. I went out a minute later after the deputies and her truck was already pulling onto the road and I never saw her again. Never learned her name. The sheriff's department had it, I'm sure, in some report, but I never asked. I think about her all the time, though. I think about her every time some loud kid comes through my door deciding who matters and who doesn't. I think about how the most dangerous person in that room was also the gentlest, and how that wasn't a contradiction at all, how maybe that's exactly what real strength looks like when it finally walks in the door. Quiet, in a faded gray shirt, wanting nothing but a sandwich and to be left alone. We're so quick, all of us, to decide a person is nobody. The quiet one, The tired one, the one who won't take the bait. We mistake calm for weakness every single time, and every single time we're wrong. She had Milkshake running down her back and she didn't even flinch. Because she'd already learned the thing the rest of us spend our whole lives missing. The loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful one. It's the one who has nothing left to prove.